I'm Leroy.
I'm Drew.
And this
Welcome
is
to
ComicTube. Alright, no, but all jokes aside. So, we're back. First thing on the news, it turns out that Marvel has announced their new Marvel Legacy. And actually, the funny thing about Legacy is that it is the same thing that DC did last year with their DC Comics Rebirth, which is actually pretty cool. The point of this, as comics do every couple of weeks, is rebooting their storylines.
So, the thing I have to say I'm excited about, Leroy, is because DC Rebirth kind of saved the DC universe with their relaunch because it went back to more classic stories and sometimes even classic renumbering of titles instead of starting at number ones, which has kind of oversaturated the entire genre. So we have our Marvel titles going back to some of their original numbers, and we have a lot of our classic characters returning. You have Bruce Banner is back as the Hulk, Thor is Thor Odinson. You have even Tony Stark is back to being Iron Man.
And you know what's the great thing about this new relaunch? There's a lot of different stories to come apart, and they might just condense everything, bringing back the viewers back to how it used to be. But one of the best titles that I'm actually looking forward to, they're actually returning the Hulk. First story arc is going to be Return to Planet Hulk, which is pretty cool. Sam Wilson's going to be back as the Falcon. So hopefully it is like DC, where DC kind of brought everything back together so that people have a better understanding. Maybe Marvel can do the same.
And also, you can't expect a better team. You have Jason Aaron, who's one of the best comic writers that they have right now. I mean, he did Wolverine in the X-Men. He did one of the Marvel Events, Original Sin. And you have Asad Ribic, who, besides being a phenomenal artist himself, he did Secret Wars back with Jonathan Hickman, which was in some way kind of a big retcon of the Marvel Universe already, kind of setting the stage for what would become Legacy. Yeah. So it's gonna. I'm excited, and I think this is what it needs.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, hopefully there's more accessibility to new readers as well as old readers ahead, and they always try to do that every so often. Hopefully this one kind of sticks.
Yeah. So, hot off the Marvel retreat, it's been announced that Spider-Man 2, and that's not Spider-Man, Spider-Men 2, will be released in July. Returning are writer Brian Michael Bendis and artist Sarah Puccelli, and it's going to be having one of, in my mind, the best story of Peter Parker from our mainstream Marvel universe will be teaming up with Miles Morales, who at one time was known as the Ultimate Spider-Man from the now sadly deceased Ultimate Marvel Universe, and I'm very excited. What do you think, Leroy?
For a lot of people who haven't read the first Spider-Man yet, you should go and pick it up at your local store. It's a great story. A lot of people know Miles Morales as the half Puerto Rican, half African American Spider-Man. Miles Morales, hey, what's up? And he's becoming an easy fan favorite.
Absolutely.
He's become a big fan favorite. Everyone's liking it, and they're doing stories. But it was interesting because Spider-Man, the first one, was the first story that brought them two together.
Absolutely.
And this is going to be, this is a sequel.
Well, I think the most interesting thing especially is that the Marvel Universe, it's not that marvelous. It's been called 616 because there have been other universes within it. And the
or for DC watchers, Earth 1, just to kind of let confusion off. Yeah.
For that, the Ultimate Marvel Universe was a different reality. So certain things were different. And in that reality, Peter Parker had been dead for almost a year. Yeah. So to have Miles teaming up with Peter of a different universe was amazing, and now Miles is part of the current Marvel Universe, and he's a member of the Champions. He was on the Avengers, so you have that, and even Peter Parker isn't the same. You have Peter Parker, who's now kind of become a Tony Stark, being the head of a Parker Industries company. You have them teaming up, but I think the thing I'm really excited for was the cliffhanger in Spider-Man 1 discussed a Miles Morales from, at that time, the 616 universe, and was left on a kind of shocking cliffhanger. And the promotional images have promised that we will find out who is the other Miles Morales.
And you that read, and possible spoilers if you haven't been reading, has ever since Miles Morales came back to the main universe, has he ran into Peter Parker yet or no?
Oh yeah, he's teamed up with Peter
since then.
Absolutely.
So the sequel will be all right.
So it's continuing their relationship. I think the big thing is really who is Miles Morales? This other Miles. And you have to kind of say, like, what could freak out Peter Parker so much that we left on that cringing cliffhanger? So, I mean, it starts in July. It'll probably be about 5 or 6 issues. And if you have no idea what we're talking about, I really recommend picking up the first one. It's an excellent read.
One thing that I'm hoping that it happens is that it takes place in the main continuity and not a separate story like the first one.
Absolutely.
Spider-Man was a separate story. Hopefully this will bring it in the main continuity, but we'll see.
Absolutely.
So let's jump into DC, actually. If you are a fan of Watchmen comics or Watchmen, the series, it turns out that Damon Lindelof, who was the co-creator of Lost, is trying to create he's trying to develop a TV series for HBO. It's not related to Zack Snyder's movie or the TV show that he tried to make, but he's trying to create a television series on the Watchmen for that.
And that you have to wonder, there's so much Watchmen material. It's not just the 1985 graphic novel, but there was an event, I believe it was in 2011, 2012.
Before Watchmen?
Yeah, before Watchmen was just sort of a prequel explaining it.
Yeah.
And that has a somewhat polarized opinion because you had some people were like Alan Moore and thought it was absolutely unnecessary, and you had some people like Dave Gibbons, the artist who worked on it, said that it was fine and there was really nothing wrong with it, but the sales kind of showed that, what it really comes down to is the sales. So personally, I liked certain elements of Zack Snyder's Watchmen. I thought it was a really faithful adaptation to an extent, well acted and whatnot. So I'm interested, but the thing being is, I kind of want to ask why.
I think I can answer that. A lot of things are better told in TV series than movies.
That's true.
12, so let's say 12 issues, one episode per issue. I mean, that would make a lot of sense. TV, you see things like The Flash, you see things like Arrow, the CW shows,
and
Netflix shows,
exactly.
Daredevil, Iron Fist, things like that. Well, TV has a more in-depth explanation, and it might be good, it might be not. I don't know.
Well,
but I'm hoping for the
You
best.
also have to think of Lindelof's track record, because Lost itself had, as you know, its good seasons and its bad seasons and whatnot. And one of the last things Lindelof did also was he did Prometheus. And that very much can be described as a somewhat polarizing movie because it was that odd sort of, is it a prequel? It's kind of a prequel to the Alien franchise.
I like Prometheus.
I understand that, but a lot of people had mixed, I had a mixed opinion of it. So you're walking into something that's basically the absolute epitome of the graphic novel. This is something that's read like it's actual literature, and it's written.
A lot of people, it means a lot to a lot of people.
Exactly.
I think the only way it would work, if I had an opinion, it would be if it's just one season, 12 episodes.
Absolutely.
Leave it to one season and that's it. Anything after that will be overkill, in my opinion.
I absolutely agree. So the main thing, especially being if they are going to continue this, to know who's going to be cast, who would be the
Rated
directors. It has to be rated R because the content is beyond censoring to some sort of PG-13
And I think given
level.
the political climate that we live in now, it's appropriate.
Absolutely. So I think in some way we just have to really have faith that DC, since it is technically in the DC banner, is going to do well. So who knows? So although Rebirth has been in a new light on the DC universe, it appears that Dark Days are coming. Recently, Dark Days The Forge was released in comic book shops, I believe it was last week, and already we're seeing, I would say, a really intense, I'm not even sure how to describe it, just story unfolding. You have Scott Snyder, who's pretty much leading the whole thing, and him, James Tynion, and I think a few other writers and artists are going to be all collaborating in this story that basically starts with Batman investigating a mystery surrounding metals scattered throughout the DC universe and their connection to certain heroes. Leroy, have you got a chance to read it?
I did, and before we continue on, I want to recommend for anyone who's watching, if you do want to understand this, you need to go back and read Court of the Owls, the first volume in New 52 DC, as well as, what was it? It was Court of the Owls, what was the... It didn't have 2 volumes, right? It was
Court of Owls had 2 volumes, and we're talking about Snyder and Capullo's best-selling
Big run.
Batman New 52 run, and you have Court of the Owls, you have Endgame. All of these are plot threads that Snyder and Capullo...
Recommended reading before you read this
Absolutely.
new arc.
They've been scattering these throughout their entire run, and now we really see all those plot threads tied up. And you have...
I got a great way to describe it.
Oh, please.
If DC... Well, let's say Court of the Owls is Green Lantern Rebirth. For those who are familiar with DC, this would be his Sinestro Corps.
Absolutely.
In a way.
Because what's basically the big thing happening is that you have this secret that is so impressive that Bruce has hid it from everybody, including his Justice League friends, his Bat family. Nobody knows.
It's really good. And to take away, not story-wise, trying to veer away from spoilers, one thing I like about it is that as I was reading it, I felt like I was finally reading a good Batman book again. Which has been hard personally for me, but it's something that I feel like a lot of people would appreciate, and it's tying the whole DC universe in a way where it's like, oh, this is good.
And the other important thing is that after the Forge, there'll also be the casting, and then we're going to launch into DC's, I believe it's called Dark Days Metal, which will team up Snyder and Capullo, which will start, I believe, in August. And it's going to start, it's going to be about 6-7 issues, and supposedly this book is not supposed to be, as Snyder described it, dark and depressing, but it's going to be amazingly fun, crazy, and just 100% good comics. And DC has been really on top of
always.
that. Their rebirth has been absolutely wonderful. And this is basically one of the first events that we're really seeing from the rebirth. This is, I'm beyond excited.
We had the button.
We had the button, but the button is a precursor to a lot of what's going on here. So I feel like the button was one part of the mystery. This is another part, and it's all leading up to an amazing confrontation of a proportion I don't even think we've seen in DC in years.
I agree. No, I fully agree. You can either pick up the single issues, or if you're lazy, wait for the graphic novel.
So either ways, I definitely suggest leaving the light on, because Dark Days are definitely coming.